The morning I discovered that my bank account was empty, I made toast. That is the part people find strange when I tell this story. I was 74 years old. I had just watched a red warning message appear on my computer screen, telling me that the transfer I had been trying to make could not be completed because there were insufficient funds in my account. I stared at the number. $14.62. Then I went into the kitchen, put 2 slices of bread into the toaster, and waited for them to turn brown. After you have spent your entire life being careful with money, sometimes the mind refuses to understand how quickly it can disappear. If you stay with me, I will tell you why I lost almost everything I had saved over 51 years, and why the worst part was not the money. I know this because I started working at 17, saved my first $40 in a metal coffee tin, bought my first house at 32, raised a son alone after my husband died, and entered old age believing that caution could protect me from betrayal. I had $386,000. 18 months later, I had $14.62. And the person who took it from me was someone I loved enough to invite into my home. Her name was Rebecca. She was my niece. For 30 years, she called me Aunt Helen. I had no idea that one day I would hear her call me something else. My husband, David, died when I was 58. It was a Tuesday in February. Snow had been falling since morning, and by the time the doctor came out of the hospital room, wet slush had soaked through the bottom of my shoes. David was 61. We had been married for 36 years. He left me a small life insurance payment, our house, and a sentence that stayed with me much longer than I expected. 3 weeks before he died, when we still believed the surgery might help, he looked at me from his hospital bed and said, "Helen, promise me you won't be afraid of being alone." I promised. I lied. I was terrified. But fear can make a person disciplined. I stopped buying things I didn't need. I worked longer than I had planned. I invested carefully. Every month, on the first Sunday, I wrote down exactly how much money I had. By the time I turned 70, I had enough to live comfortably. Not extravagantly. Comfortably. That word meant everything to me. It meant the heating bill could arrive without frightening me. It meant I could buy medicine without checking the price first. It meant that if the roof leaked, I could fix it. I believed I had earned safety. That was my first mistake. Money can buy security. But it cannot always buy judgment. Rebecca came into my life again when she was 39. Her mother, my younger sister, had died years earlier, and I had always tried to stay close to her. She was charming. That is important. People often imagine that someone who betrays you must look dishonest. Rebecca did not. She brought flowers. She remembered my birthday. She hugged me tightly when she arrived and said, "Aunt Helen, you shouldn't be alone so much." At first, I appreciated her concern. Then she began visiting every Thursday. At 6:30 in the evening, she would arrive with groceries or takeout. We would sit in my kitchen and talk. She told me about her divorce, her debts, her problems at work. I listened. Sometimes I helped her financially. A few $100s here. 1,000 there. She always promised to pay me back. She rarely did. But I didn't care. Or I told myself I didn't. When you are 73 and the house becomes quiet after dinner, company can feel more valuable than money. That was the second thing I misunderstood. Loneliness makes generosity dangerous when you confuse being needed with being loved. One evening in October, Rebecca brought a folder. It was 8:17 p.m. I remember the time because I looked at the clock when she placed the papers on my dining table. "Aunt Helen," she said, "have you ever thought about simplifying your finances?" I laughed. "I've been managing them for 50 years. "I know," she said. "But you're getting older. There are sentences that should make you uncomfortable. That one did. But Rebecca smiled. I don't mean anything bad. I just worry. What if something happens to you? She showed me charts. Retirement projections. Investment opportunities. She told me that my money was sitting still when it could be growing. I didn't understand half of what she said. And I was embarrassed to admit it. That is how people like me become easy to manipulate. Not because we are stupid. Because we are ashamed of what we don't know. Rebecca had a friend, she said, who worked with private investments. He helps people like you. People like me. I should have asked what that meant. Instead, I nodded. The first transfer was $25,000. Rebecca sat beside me while I signed the documents. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From age. See, she said. Nothing complicated. 3 months later, the account showed a gain. Then another. We built one. Brick by brick. Bill by bill. Child by child. Year by year. But suddenly I wondered whether a life built after a closed door could ever feel like the first choice. That question kept me awake for 3 nights. On the 4th day, I called my son. I told him about Anna. There was a long silence. Then Michael said, Mom, Dad loved you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? He hesitated. Then he said, because when I was 15, I found one of those letters. My hand tightened around the phone. What? I asked him who Anna was. I could hear Michael breathing. And what did he say? He said, she was the life I thought I wanted. I closed my eyes. And then? Michael's voice became quieter. He said, your mother was the life I didn't know I needed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Michael said, Mom, I always thought that was romantic. I looked at Thomas's empty chair. No, I said. It isn't romantic when you're the person sitting across from him and you don't know the sentence exists. That was the truth. Love can be real and still leave someone wounded. A person can choose you every morning and still carry someone else somewhere inside them. I had spent days trying to decide whether that meant Thomas had betrayed me. Then, 2 weeks later, there was a knock at my front door. I began to trust her. She would visit and open her laptop at my kitchen table. Look at this, Aunt Helen. You made $8,000 this month. I felt foolishly proud. For the first time in years, I imagined leaving more money to my son. Maybe helping my grandchildren with college. Maybe taking the trip to Italy David and I had postponed for 30 years. Then Rebecca suggested moving more. Not all of it, she said. That was the phrase she used. Not all of it. Just enough. The next transfer was $75,000. Then $100,000. Then another. Each time, there was paperwork. Explanations. New passwords. Rebecca even helped me set up a separate email address for the investment account. You don't want too many passwords to remember, she told me. I let her manage them. At 74, I gave another person access to nearly everything I had because I believed trust was the same thing as proof. It isn't. My son, Daniel, tried to warn me. He was 48 then. He lived 2 states away and visited every few months. One Sunday afternoon, he found Rebecca and me looking at investment statements. What's this? He asked. Rebecca answered before I could. Aunt Helen is diversifying. Daniel looked at me. Mom, do you understand where your money is? Of course. Can I see the details? Rebecca closed the laptop. I think Helen deserves privacy. Something in Daniel's face changed. He looked directly at me. Mom, can we talk alone? I became angry. That is what shame does. It often disguises itself as anger. I don't need you checking up on me. I'm not checking up on you. Yes, you are. Rebecca touched my arm. Aunt Helen, he's just worried. That made me even more defensive. Because suddenly I had two people standing in my kitchen, and I wanted to prove that I was still capable of making my own decisions. So I chose the person who made me feel capable. Not the person asking difficult questions. Daniel left early that afternoon. At the door, he said, Mom, please. Just have an independent financial advisor look at this. I didn't. For 11 months, I didn't. The first sign came in March. I asked Rebecca to withdraw $10,000. I wanted to replace the roof. She said the money was temporarily locked. It's normal, she explained. How long? A few weeks. 3 weeks became 6. 6 became 12. Then Rebecca stopped coming every Thursday. She was busy. She was traveling. She wasn't feeling well. Her phone calls became shorter. One morning, I woke up and realized I had not spoken to her in 19 days. I called. No answer. I sent a message. Nothing. The next day, I drove to my bank. The manager looked at the documents for almost 20 minutes. Then he asked, Mrs. Carter, who helped you make these transfers? I felt cold. My niece. He looked at me again. Did you know that these funds were sent to accounts controlled by a company that is no longer operating? I didn't understand. Where is my money? He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me enough. The investigation lasted months. There were forms, phone calls, interviews. I learned words I had never wanted to learn. Fraud, unauthorized access, false documentation, shell companies. By the end, investigators determined that much of the money had been moved through accounts connected to Rebecca and the man she had introduced to me. Some money was recovered. The money, she asked. Her voice was almost a whisper. I shook my head. No. The room was completely silent. You came into my house when I was lonely. Rebecca began to cry. You sat at my table. You hugged me. You called me family. I felt my throat tighten. And I was so grateful that someone wanted to spend time with me that I stopped asking why. Rebecca covered her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the $14.62. The empty account. The calls I had ignored from my son. And I understood something. Forgiveness does not require you to rewrite what happened. So I finished my statement. You didn't just take my savings. You used my loneliness to get close enough to take them. Then I sat down. And for the first time in 2 years, I did not feel weak. Just sad. There is a difference. Today, I am 78. I sold the house David and I lived in for 36 years. That hurt. I moved into a smaller apartment with 1 bedroom and a balcony barely large enough for 2 chairs. My financial life is different now. Simpler. I do not have the money I once had. But I have learned rules I wish I had known earlier. Here is the most important one. Never let the person who benefits from your financial decision be the only person explaining it to you. Ask someone independent. Ask a second person. Take the papers home. Sleep on them. And if someone makes you feel embarrassed because you don't understand something, stop immediately. Embarrassment is expensive. So is loneliness. These days, Daniel calls me every Wednesday evening. We don't talk about money much. Sometimes he tells me about work. Sometimes I complain about my neighbors. Sometimes we sit on the phone saying almost nothing. And I have learned that being alone is not the same as being abandoned. That was the lesson hidden underneath everything. I trusted Rebecca partly because I wanted to believe that needing me meant loving me. But people who love you do not need access to everything you own. They need access to your life. There is a difference. Sometimes I still wake at 4 o'clock in the morning and think about the number. $386,000. Then $14.62. For a long time, those numbers felt like the summary of my life. They aren't anymore. I lost money. A great deal of it. I lost a house. I lost years of security. But I did not lose the ability to recognize love when it was finally standing in front of me. My son was there. Even after I pushed him away. Even after I refused to listen. That matters more to me now than the balance of any account. The toaster I used on the morning I discovered everything is still in my kitchen. It came with me when I moved. Last week, Daniel visited for breakfast. I put in 2 slices of bread and waited. They burned. We both laughed. Then Daniel reached for them. "Mom, those are black." "I know. You're going to eat that?" I looked at him and smiled. "No. I threw them away and made new ones." It sounds like nothing. But for me, it isn't. For years, I believed that once something was ruined, I had to keep it. The house. The secret. The shame. The burned toast. I don't believe that anymore. Some things are meant to be thrown away. Especially the guilt that was never yours to carry.